AITA for refusing to help my sister pay off her student loans after she dropped out of college to become a YouTuber. So I, 28F, have a sister, Rachel, 24F, who has always been the type to chase after passion projects rather than follow a traditional career path. For context, I went to college, got my degree in business, and have a stable 9 to 5 job where I make a comfortable salary. Rachel, on the other hand, started college a few years ago, but dropped out after 2 semesters to try and build a career as a YouTuber. She told our parents she was going to be the next big thing, that she'd be making millions soon, and that dropping out was the best move for her. At first, my parents were supportive, even though they didn't fully get the whole influencer thing. They paid for her tuition and living expenses during the first 2 semesters, but when she dropped out, they stopped supporting her financially. Rachel moved back in with our parents and started making YouTube videos about makeup, lifestyle, and vlogging her day-to-day life. She had a few thousand followers, but wasn't anywhere near the level of success she envisioned. Over the next 2 years, she tried to keep up with the YouTube thing, but wasn't really growing. She complained a lot about how hard it was, how YouTube's algorithm was unfair, how her content didn't get enough attention. She'd occasionally ask our parents for money to boost her channel, like paying for ads or equipment, but they cut her off financially after a while. My parents had their own financial goals and weren't willing to keep funding something they saw as a hobby that wasn't going anywhere. That's where I come in. Rachel, now out of school for 3 years, still has a ton of student loans that she hasn't been paying off. She's been relying on odd jobs and her YouTube earnings, but it's barely enough to cover rent and basic living expenses, much less her student loans. Recently, she reached out to me and asked if I could help her pay off her student loans. She said she needed help because her career was just starting to take off and that in a few months, she'd be making enough money to handle everything herself. She told me she was expecting a big break soon, and if I helped her pay off the loans, I'd be able to see a return on my investment in the future because she'd be able to pay me back once she got her YouTube career rolling. I immediately said no. Now, here's the thing. I love my sister, but I've always been a little skeptical of her big dreams. She's been trying to make it big on YouTube for years now, and I haven't seen any real progress. I'm also a little frustrated that she didn't take her education seriously and instead put all her eggs in the basket of hoping to go viral. I understand it's hard to start a career in something creative, but I can't be the one to take on the financial burden of her choices. I'm paying off my own student loans, saving for my future, and managing my own finances. Helping her just doesn't seem like a smart move. After I refused, Rachel got really upset. She said I was unsupportive and greedy for not helping her out, especially considering I make more money than she does. She told me that it was unfair, I didn't believe in her potential, and that if I really cared about her, I would be willing to help her get back on her feet. She even said that if I loved her, I would invest in her future. I told her that it's not my responsibility to pay off her debts or fund her dreams, especially when she hasn't taken the necessary steps to make her YouTube career sustainable. I told her she needs to take responsibility for her financial situation, and it's not fair for me to help her when she hasn't made any progress on her own. Our conversation ended on a sour note, and since then, she's barely spoken to me. Our parents have been caught in the middle, and they've said I'm being too harsh. They think I should just help her out and that she's going through a rough patch. They also say she's so talented and that I shouldn't be so quick to dismiss her potential. They even mentioned that maybe I don't want to help because I'm jealous of her success. Now I'm starting to second-guess myself. Was I too harsh? Should I have helped her, even if I'm not convinced it's a good idea? I know that if I gave her the money, it would likely go toward the loans and not actually help her build a career. But am I being a bad sister for refusing to help? AITA for not helping my sister with her student loans and not believing in her YouTube career? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AIDEA for wanting to tell my best friend the truth about her fiancé, even though it might ruin their relationship. So, I, 29F, have been best friends with Mia, 30F, for over 10 years. We met in college, and we've been through thick and thin together. Mia is one of those people who's always been super trusting, optimistic, and she's got this kind of rose-colored glasses view of life. It's one of the things I love most about her. She's genuinely one of the kindest people I know. A little over a year ago, Mia met Brad, 32M, a guy she got really serious with quickly. They got engaged a few months ago, and to be honest, I thought it was too fast. But Mia seemed so happy, and I didn't want to rain on her parade, so I supported her. The thing is, for the past few months, I've been increasingly concerned about some things I've learned about Brad, and now I'm in a position where I'm unsure if I should tell Mia everything I know. Here's the thing. I've heard things about Brad that I can't just ignore. I first noticed something odd when I met Brad's friends at a dinner party they hosted. There was this weird tension in the air the entire evening. Brad seemed really defensive when I asked about his past, especially when it came to his exes. He dodged questions and changed the topic pretty quickly. I figured it was just awkward small talk, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Then about a month ago, I found out from a mutual friend of ours, Sarah, that Brad was involved in some shady stuff before he met Mia. Sarah works in real estate and heard from one of her clients that Brad had been involved in a legal dispute related to fraud. I didn't think much of it at first, but after talking to Sarah more, I found out that this wasn't just a one-off rumor. Apparently, Brad had been under investigation for some financial misdeeds, though nothing criminally charged yet. It made me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions without knowing more. What really pushed me to start paying closer attention was when Mia and I were talking one evening, and she mentioned how Brad had recently started acting more distant. She told me he was still working long hours, but when they spent time together, he seemed distracted or withdrawn. Mia wasn't sure if it was because of stress at work, but I could see that she was worried. She's always been sensitive to people's moods, so I knew she wasn't making this up. That's when I started paying more attention to how Brad was acting around her. A few weeks ago, I ran into Brad at a coffee shop, and he seemed very off. I've known Brad long enough to recognize when something is wrong, and that day, he just looked uncomfortable. I didn't want to pry, but I couldn't help myself. I asked him if everything was okay between him and Mia. He gave me a weird half-smile and just said, "Yeah, everything's fine, just some stuff at work. Don't worry about it." I should have left it there, but I asked again, is it really just work, or is it something else? Mia's been a little upset lately. Brad's expression darkened. He told me that Mia had been a bit too clingy and that he was just needing space. I was taken aback because that's not the Brad I knew. I've always seen him as laid back and easygoing, not the type to shut someone out like that. But before I could say anything else, he quickly changed the subject, asking me if I'd been working on anything interesting lately. Something didn't sit right with me. I kept thinking about the legal stuff I'd heard, and now this weird interaction. The next day, I decided to do a little more digging. I called Sarah and asked her about the fraud rumors again. She didn't know many details, but she told me she'd heard from a few people that Brad had been involved in a bad business deal before he met Mia, and that there were a lot of people who were still holding a grudge against him for it. Now I'm feeling conflicted. I don't want to destroy Mia's happiness, but at the same time, I can't shake the feeling that Brad might be hiding something important from her. I've been going back and forth in my mind about whether I should tell Mia everything I know. I know that if I do, it could completely blow up her relationship, and she might even choose to stay with Brad despite what I tell her. Or worse, she might end our friendship because she feels betrayed by me for interfering. The hardest part is that Mia has been so happy with Brad. She talks about their future together all the time, and I hate the idea of being the person who shatters her dreams. But I also can't ignore this nagging feeling that Brad isn't being fully honest with her. If I don't say anything, I'll always wonder if I did the right thing, especially if something bad happens later down the line. I've talked to a few other friends about it, and some say I should keep my mouth shut because it's not my place. They argue that Mia is an adult and can handle her own relationships. But another part of me thinks that if I'm really her best friend, I should be looking out for her, even if it means telling her something she doesn't want to hear. At the end of the day, I'm just trying to figure out whether or not it's my place to tell Mia the truth, even if it might hurt her. Am I being a good friend, or am I crossing a line? AITA for considering telling Mia the truth about Brad? AITA for ruining my best friend's wedding by showing up uninvited after her fiancé tried to publicly humiliate me? So here's the situation. I, 29F, have been best friends with Mia, 29F, for almost 15 years. We met in high school, and though we've had our ups and downs, we've always been there for each other. Mia has been dating this guy, Tom, 32M, for about 3 years now. To be honest, I never really liked him. He's always been kind of, well, distant is the best word for it. He's polite, but he's also a little condescending, especially when it comes to me. Mia is head over heels for him, though, and I've always respected that. I've kept my opinions about him to myself, despite how his behavior has rubbed me the wrong way. Now, fast forward to a few weeks ago, and Mia invites me to her wedding. I was happy for her, or at least I wanted to be happy for her. But here's where things get complicated. I had been in a long-term relationship with my ex, Jack, 31M, for 5 years before we broke up about 6 months ago. Our breakup was really messy, and while I'm doing much better now, I had a rough time of it for a while. The thing is, Mia and Tom knew about Jack. They both knew we were in a committed relationship, and Mia even helped me through the worst of it. However, during the time I was going through the breakup, Tom made a comment that really stuck with me. We were all hanging out at a mutual friend's house, and Jack wasn't there. Tom, in front of everyone, looked at me and said, "I've always thought it was a matter of time before you two broke up. You're just too emotionally unstable to maintain a relationship like that." I was stunned. I just stared at him, and Mia, of course, laughed, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. Later, when I brought it up to her privately, she told me I was being too sensitive and that Tom was just trying to be funny. I didn't speak to Tom for a while after that, but Mia and I continued to stay close, even though I couldn't shake the feeling that Tom's comment was more than just a joke. Over the months, I started to notice other little things that made me feel uncomfortable with him. He'd make little passive-aggressive remarks about my career, my appearance, even my family. Nothing overtly rude, but enough to make me feel like I was being undermined. And Mia? She never really said anything. She would just laugh it off or change the subject. It got to a point where I felt like I was being constantly belittled when I was around Tom. Then, about a month before the wedding, Mia asked me to be her maid of honor. I was honored, but also really conflicted. I'd been through a lot emotionally in the past year, and I wasn't sure I could handle the stress of being in the wedding party, especially with how strained things felt between me and Tom. I told her I wasn't sure if I could do it, and she was genuinely hurt. She begged me to reconsider, saying it meant the world to her. I eventually agreed, thinking it would be a one-time thing, and that maybe the wedding would help us move past the awkwardness. However, as the wedding drew closer, things got worse. Tom became more and more dismissive of me, and I started to feel like I was walking on eggshells whenever he was around. Mia kept saying that Tom was just a little socially awkward, and that I shouldn't take it personally, but it was personal. His behavior was starting to affect my relationship with Mia. At one point, I snapped at her and told her that if she didn't stand up for me, I wasn't sure I could keep being in the wedding. She told me I was overreacting and that I needed to let it go for her sake. The final straw came at the rehearsal dinner. Mia's family was there, Tom's family was there, and a bunch of mutual friends. We were all sitting at the table when Tom made another one of his snide comments. This time, he was talking about my ex again. He said something along the lines of, "Well, we all know how emotionally unstable someone like Jack is. I'm surprised you even lasted that long." Everyone laughed, but I felt like I was going to explode. I stood up and, in front of everyone, said, "You really have a way of making people feel like crap, don't you?" Tom's face went red, and he started to defend himself, but I didn't care anymore. I was done being polite. The argument escalated quickly. Mia told me I was embarrassing her, and Tom told me to leave. I told them both I was done, that I was leaving the wedding, and I didn't want to be a part of this anymore. Mia begged me to stay, but I just couldn't. I left, and I didn't attend the wedding. Afterward, Mia tried to reach out to me, but I didn't respond for a few days. I was hurt. I felt like my best friend had chosen Tom over me, over our friendship. Finally, Mia sent me a long message saying she couldn't believe I'd done this, that I'd ruined her special day, and that I'd taken away a memory she'd never get back. She said I was jealous of her happiness and that I had to move on from my breakup with Jack. I've tried to explain my side, but she doesn't seem to understand. Now, a lot of our mutual friends are siding with her, saying that I overreacted and that Tom wasn't as bad as I made him out to be. They say I should have just ignored him and been there for Mia. I'm really torn. I know I probably shouldn't have exploded the way I did, but at the same time, I don't think it's fair to just let Tom treat me like that, and for Mia to ignore it. So, AITA for ruining my best friend's wedding by showing up uninvited after her fiancé tried to publicly humiliate me? AITA for refusing to pay my sister's rent after she lost her job and moving back in with our parents? So, I, 28M, have a sister, Emily, 30F. We've always had a rocky relationship, mainly because of how different we are. I've always been more independent, more responsible, while she's been, well, a bit of a free spirit. Growing up, she was the type to skip school, hang out with bad crowds, and constantly push the boundaries of what our parents set for her. She's not a bad person, but she's always had this habit of living in the moment without considering the consequences. In contrast, I worked hard to make sure I stayed on the right track. I went to a state school on a scholarship, then worked a full-time job to pay my bills. I didn't have the luxury of living rent-free or being bailed out whenever I messed up. I made my own way. Emily had a different path. She got into a good college, but dropped out after a year because she wasn't into it. She got a decent job in retail management for a while, but left it when she got bored. Then she started doing freelance work, but she never really stuck to anything long enough to make it a stable career. Recently, she got a full-time office job, but then she lost it due to cutbacks. This is where things started to get complicated. About 6 months ago, Emily asked if she could stay with me for a while. She had just moved into a small apartment in a nearby city, but after losing her job, she couldn't afford the rent anymore. I live in a decent 2-bedroom apartment, and I told her I didn't mind her staying with me for a short time, but she needed to be actively looking for a new job and would have to contribute something toward rent. At first, things were fine. She was home most of the time, so I figured she was applying for jobs. But after a couple of months, I started noticing she was hardly applying for anything. She'd spend most of her time on her phone, watching shows, or going out with friends. When I brought it up, she would say that she needed a break and that job hunting was too stressful. I tried to be understanding, but it was getting frustrating. I told her that if she didn't get serious about finding a job, she needed to start paying rent. I even suggested she pick up some freelance work or something just to contribute to the household. She promised she would, but nothing changed. Meanwhile, I was paying for everything. I had to pick up her slack. I didn't mind helping her out for a while, but it had been months, and she wasn't making any effort to change her situation. She'd occasionally buy a few groceries or contribute a couple $100 here and there, but I felt like I was the one carrying the weight of our shared living expenses. Then about a month ago, things took a turn. I got a message from my parents asking me to help Emily out with her rent again. Apparently, she had talked to them and asked if they could help cover her rent since she was having trouble finding a job. My parents are very supportive and have always tried to be there for us, but I told them that I didn't think it was the right move. I told them that they shouldn't just bail her out because I'd already been doing that for months. They seemed a little disappointed in me for not helping my sister, but I felt like I had done enough. The final straw came when Emily told me she wanted to move back in with our parents. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I understood that she needed a place to stay while she got back on her feet. But then she said something that rubbed me the wrong way. Honestly, I think it's time for you to help me out more. I've been really stressed and need a break. If you don't help me cover rent this month, I'll just move back in with Mom and Dad. They're willing to help. I was taken aback. I had been helping her for months, and she was now trying to put pressure on me to cover her rent again. She was acting like I was the bad guy for not wanting to keep footing the bill for her lifestyle. It wasn't just about the money at this point. It was about the principle of it all. I told her that I wouldn't be paying her rent. I reminded her that she was an adult and needed to take responsibility for her own life. I suggested she either move back with our parents or start making serious efforts to find a job and contribute. She was angry, saying that I was selfish and didn't care about her, and that I had been lucky enough to never experience the hardships she was going through. I tried to remain calm, but I couldn't help feeling like she was completely disregarding the help I had already given her. My parents called me shortly afterward to ask why I wasn't being more supportive of Emily. I explained my side of the story, but they didn't seem to understand. They said I was being too hard on her and that she was going through a rough patch. They even implied that if I was more generous, she might be able to get back on track. Since then, Emily has moved back in with our parents. We haven't really spoken much since the argument, and it's been tense between me and my parents as well. They seem to think I'm being too harsh and that I should just help her out, but I feel like I've done enough. I'm really torn about this whole situation. I don't want to be the villain, but I also don't want to enable her behavior. I don't want to keep paying for her mistakes, especially when she's not taking any steps to fix things herself. So, AITA for refusing to pay my sister's rent and not bailing her out again. AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law stay with us after she accused my wife of sabotaging her wedding. So my 34M, wife 32F, and I have been together for 8 years, married for 5. We live in a small but cozy house in a suburb of a major city. My wife is an elementary school teacher, and I'm a software developer. We don't have kids yet, though we've been talking about it for a while. My wife's sister, Kelly, 28F, has always had a complicated relationship with us, mostly with my wife, but things have gotten more tense over the last few years. I want to preface this by saying that I've always tried to be supportive of Kelly and have treated her as part of my family. About a year ago, Kelly got engaged to her boyfriend, Dan, 30M, after they had been dating for 3 years. The wedding planning was going well, but there were a few bumps in the road, mostly involving Kelly's over-the-top demands and her constant stress over making everything perfect. I'll admit, I did think she was being a bit dramatic, but it wasn't my wedding, and I didn't want to get involved. My wife, on the other hand, was more hands-on with helping out. She's very organized and has a knack for planning events, so she ended up helping Kelly a lot, mostly with logistics and advice. My wife also got involved with some of the decisions about the wedding venue and decor, because Kelly was constantly second-guessing herself. Things started to go south when the actual wedding day came around. My wife had helped Kelly with almost every aspect of the wedding, from picking out the dress to arranging the seating plan, but Kelly started getting anxious and making some odd demands. On the morning of the wedding, Kelly was in full panic mode and demanded that my wife stay with her in her room while she got ready, just in case anything went wrong. My wife agreed, though she was starting to feel a little overwhelmed by the amount of responsibility Kelly was placing on her. Fast forward to the wedding ceremony. Everything seemed to go smoothly until Kelly made a scene when it came time for her wedding vows. Apparently, she had written something heartfelt and personal, but when she was standing up there, she froze. She started crying and said she couldn't remember the vows, even though she'd practiced them for weeks. It was an awkward moment, but my wife and I both figured it was just nerves. However, Kelly's breakdown didn't stop there. She started accusing people of sabotaging her special day, claiming that someone had messed with her notes. The chaos continued throughout the reception. Kelly was visibly upset, barely speaking to anyone, and kept muttering about how people were trying to ruin her wedding. There were several weird moments throughout the evening, but no one could figure out what was going on. At one point, she even snapped at my wife, saying that she had intentionally sabotaged the wedding because she was jealous of the attention Kelly was getting. My wife was absolutely shocked, but she brushed it off, thinking Kelly was just overwhelmed. After the wedding, things got even more strained. Kelly stopped speaking to my wife for weeks, but eventually she reached out and asked if she and Dan could stay with us for a few days while they looked for a new apartment. Dan had accepted a new job in our city, and they were in the middle of relocating. I thought it was a reasonable request, so I told my wife it would be fine, and she agreed. However, when Kelly arrived at our house, things took a turn. The first few days were awkward, but tolerable. Kelly kept to herself, and I tried to stay out of it. But then, on the 4th day, Kelly accused my wife of trying to steal the spotlight at her wedding. She said that my wife had made her feel like she wasn't good enough, and that she had intentionally caused her wedding day to fall apart. Kelly also implied that my wife had been jealous of her wedding and had been trying to undermine her every step of the way. This was completely out of nowhere, and I could tell my wife was hurt, but she tried to stay calm and asked Kelly what she meant by that. Kelly went on to say that while my wife was pretending to help, she had been making passive-aggressive comments and offering suggestions that Kelly had felt were judgmental. She said that my wife had always overshadowed her and was constantly trying to take control of the planning process. She even suggested that my wife was secretly glad the wedding had gone poorly because it meant she could swoop in and rescue Kelly at the last minute. This was absolutely ridiculous to me, and I could see how hurt my wife was. She had been nothing but supportive. The tension was unbearable, and I could tell my wife was starting to get frustrated. Kelly then made a statement that really crossed a line. She said, "I should have known you were the one who made me forget my vows. You always make everything about you." That was the moment I had enough. I stood up and told Kelly that she needed to leave our house. I said that we had tried to be supportive, but I wasn't going to let her come into our home and treat my wife like that. Kelly was furious, saying that I was taking my wife's side and being unreasonable. She said that I was enabling my wife to manipulate her, and she accused me of not caring about her feelings. She left in a rage, and since then, she's been posting all over social media, telling our extended family that we kicked her out because we didn't want to hear her feelings. She's claiming that I'm the villain in all of this and that I'm just enabling my wife's behavior. I've spoken to a few of our family members, and they mostly think I was right to kick Kelly out, but a couple of them think I overreacted. Some of them say that because Kelly was going through a tough time, I should have been more patient with her. Others are saying that maybe my wife did unintentionally contribute to Kelly's anxiety, though they still think Kelly was out of line. I feel like I was just standing up for my wife, but now I'm feeling guilty. AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law stay with us after all of this drama. AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law bring her dog to my wedding after she threatened to ruin the event. So, this situation started a few months ago when my fiancé and I started planning our wedding. We're having a relatively small, intimate ceremony with close family and friends, and because of the pandemic, we're keeping things pretty tight-knit to avoid unnecessary stress. My fiancé has a very large family, and I'm pretty close with most of them. My sister-in-law, let's call her Sarah, is a bit of a wild card, though. She's a great person, but she can be unpredictable, especially when it comes to her dog, which she treats like a literal child. Now, this dog is a cute little thing, but it's extremely high maintenance. Sarah insists on bringing the dog everywhere, even to places where pets aren't allowed, which is already an issue. She has a tendency to ignore the rules because the dog is part of the family, and everyone is just supposed to accept it. The dog is also incredibly loud and gets anxious in unfamiliar environments, so it often disrupts gatherings. I've been to several family events where the dog was just barking the entire time or making a mess, and while I love animals, I don't think a wedding is the right place for one to be running around. When we sent out the invitations for our wedding, I had no plans to allow pets, and I made this very clear when people asked. This included Sarah, as I knew she would likely try to bring her dog. I didn't want any distractions during our ceremony or reception, and having a dog there would just add to the chaos. I'm also allergic to dogs, and I didn't want to risk having an allergy attack on my wedding day, which is already a high-stress event. We didn't even plan to have any pets in the venue, and I didn't want to be the one to make an exception. When Sarah RSVP'd, she mentioned she was planning to bring her dog. I gently told her that while I understood how important the dog was to her, I had already made the decision not to allow pets at the wedding. She seemed fine with it at first, but then she came back to me a week later with a bit of a surprise. She said that if she couldn't bring her dog, she wouldn't be coming to the wedding. She explained that she couldn't bear to be away from her dog for that long, and she would rather skip the event than leave her pet behind. I tried to remain calm and told her again that the wedding was already planned, and there wasn't a way to accommodate the dog. I suggested she might want to get a pet sitter or leave the dog with someone else for the day. I told her that it would be one day and that I really wanted her to be there, but that the wedding was going to be a pet-free zone. I thought this was a reasonable request, especially considering how much work and planning had gone into the event. But Sarah wasn't having it. She continued to push the issue, saying things like, "I'll just bring the dog and keep it in the car," or "I'll just leave it outside for the ceremony," which were both non-starters. I told her that neither of those options were safe and it wasn't an acceptable solution. That's when she really started to escalate things. She sent me a long message basically accusing me of being selfish and inconsiderate. She said that I was ruining family bonds by demanding that she choose between her dog and her family. She even went so far as to say that if I couldn't accept the dog being there, it would be a huge betrayal of my relationship with her and it would reflect badly on my character. I was taken aback by how far she went, and I tried to keep my cool, explaining that I wasn't asking her to choose between her dog and me. I was just asking her to leave the dog at home for one day. Then came the final blow. Sarah called me up one evening and told me that if she couldn't bring her dog, she'd make sure that the wedding would be a disaster. She said she would show up anyway with the dog, and that if I tried to stop her, she would cause a scene and ruin the day for everyone. She said she would do everything she could to make sure my wedding would be unforgettable in the worst possible way. I was speechless. At this point, I was honestly feeling like I had no other choice but to put my foot down. I sent her a firm text saying that if she wasn't going to respect my wishes and be a part of my special day without the dog, she could stay home. I told her I didn't want any drama on the day, and I wouldn't tolerate any threats to ruin the event. I know that sounds harsh, but I felt like she was being completely unreasonable. Since then, Sarah has been spreading the word to other members of the family, telling them that I'm being a bad sister-in-law and heartless for not letting her bring her dog. A few people have reached out to me, questioning why I wouldn't just let her have the dog there. Some of them say it's just a dog and that I should get over it for the sake of family harmony. But at the end of the day, this is my wedding, and I want it to be about the people I love and who support me, not a dog that isn't even my responsibility. So now, I'm stuck in this awkward situation. Sarah is threatening not to come, and she's bad-mouthing me to the family. I've even been told that some relatives are considering not attending if Sarah doesn't come, which feels like they're trying to pressure me into changing my stance. I've tried to remain calm, but the whole situation is really draining, and I feel like I'm being forced to choose between standing my ground and potentially losing a significant portion of my family. Am I the asshole for standing firm on this? Or should I have just let her bring the dog for the sake of family peace? Should I have given in? I'm really torn on this, and I need some perspective. Help! AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law bring her kids to my wedding after her behavior at my fiancé's family event. So I'm 28, and my fiancé, 31, and I are getting married in a few months. It's been a whirlwind of wedding planning, and we try to keep things as low-key as possible, but my fiancé's family has been a bit overbearing, especially his sister, Amanda, 34, and her kids. She has 3 kids, ages 7, 5, and 2. We've been on decent terms with her, but things have been getting a bit tense ever since she caused a scene at a family gathering about a month ago. I don't know if I'm overreacting, so I'm hoping you all can help me figure it out. Here's the backstory. Amanda and her husband, Steve, invited my fiancé and me to a family event they were hosting. It was a birthday party for Amanda's oldest kid, Ella. We've gone to a few family events together, and they've generally been okay, but this one really rubbed me the wrong way. It started with her kids running wild throughout the house, knocking things over, and just being completely out of control. I know kids can be a bit much, but it felt like there was zero effort on her part to rein them in. I didn't say anything at first because I didn't want to cause a scene, but it started getting worse as the day went on. At one point, my fiancé and I were trying to have a conversation in a quieter corner, and the kids started throwing toys in our direction. When I politely asked Amanda if she could have them stop, she laughed and said, "That's just how kids are. Lighten up." It wasn't just the toys. Her youngest, Jamie, started throwing his food all over the place, and no one seemed to care. I noticed my fiancé's mom was visibly frustrated, but Amanda just brushed it off, saying that we should all just relax and enjoy the chaos. Things got even worse when Amanda decided to involve me in her fun. We were sitting down for dinner, and she suddenly asked me if I would help her wrangle the kids so she could eat. I've never been close enough with her to take on that kind of responsibility. So I politely declined and said that I was planning to enjoy the meal and not chase after kids. She got a little snippy with me, telling me, "Well, I guess it's too much to ask if someone to help out when we're all family, huh?" I was taken aback, but I stayed calm and told her I wasn't comfortable doing that. She then muttered something under her breath about how I was too uptight and wouldn't know how to have fun if it hit me in the face. After that, I tried to distance myself from the situation. My fiancé and I spent the rest of the evening talking to other family members, but it was clear that Amanda was upset with me. When we were leaving, she pulled me aside and said, "You better not try to pull that kind of attitude at your wedding, or I'll make sure the kids have a real fun time. This isn't the last family event you'll attend, you know." I didn't know what to make of her threat, but I brushed it off as her just being passive-aggressive. However, it stuck with me, and I started thinking more about it as our wedding planning continued. I've always imagined a wedding that was relatively kid-free. Not that I don't like kids, but I've always seen weddings as more of a formal, adult affair. My fiancé and I talked about it, and we both agreed that it would be nice to keep the guest list on the smaller side, and that means making some tough decisions about who we invite and who we don't. I've been talking with my fiancé's family about the wedding details, and I mentioned that we were planning to have a more adult-oriented event. I said we were considering not inviting young kids to the ceremony, except for my fiancé's niece, who's been incredibly well-behaved at family events. Everyone seemed fine with that, except for Amanda. She immediately blew up when she found out and called me a selfish brat for not considering her kids. She said that if they weren't invited, she wouldn't attend at all. She also went on to say that I'd better not ruin her children's memories by making them feel excluded from such an important family event. I'll admit, I was taken aback. I've never been close to her kids, and I've never seen them behave in a way that made me want them at my wedding. I've heard horror stories about kids causing chaos at weddings, running around, throwing tantrums, making a mess. And honestly, I just want a day where I don't have to worry about that. I'm not trying to be mean. I just don't think a wedding is the right place for kids who might not understand the formality or the atmosphere. When I stood my ground and said that we were sticking to our decision, she told me she'd never forgive me and that I was ruining the family dynamic. She even said, "You're making a huge mistake. You'll regret this when you have kids of your own." I tried to stay calm and said that I was just doing what felt right for our wedding day, but it felt like she was getting more and more personal with her attacks. To make things more complicated, Amanda has been posting passive-aggressive stuff on Facebook, talking about how some people in the family don't appreciate what it's like to be a parent and how hard it is to juggle everything while making sure your kids feel included. She's been going on about how people who don't have kids don't get it, and it's making me feel like I'm being attacked by the entire family. My fiancé has been supportive, but he's also stuck in the middle since his family is pressuring him to make me change my mind. So now I'm stuck. I feel like Amanda is being unreasonable, and I'm not going to back down on my wedding decisions, but I'm starting to feel guilty. I don't want to be the villain in this story, but at the same time, I don't think it's fair for her to force me to invite her kids just because she wants them to be there. AITA for standing firm on my decision and not inviting her kids. I just want a peaceful wedding day, but now I'm worried it's going to cause permanent rifts in the family. What should I do? AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law's kids stay with us after what happened last time. So I, 29F, have been married to my husband Ben, 31M, for 5 years. We don't have kids yet, but we have a pretty close-knit family, and I love spending time with everyone. My sister-in-law, Rachel, 33F, is married to my brother-in-law, Tom, 34M, and they have 2 kids, Lucy, 7F, and Max, 4M. They live about 45 minutes away from us, so we don't see them all the time, but we get together for holidays, birthdays, and a few random weekends here and there. Usually, we enjoy the visits, but there's a pattern that I've started to get really fed up with. A couple of months ago, Rachel and Tom asked if their kids could stay at our house for the weekend while they went away for a wedding. I didn't think much of it at the time and said yes. At first, everything seemed fine. Lucy and Max are well-behaved most of the time, and we were able to keep them entertained. But things started going south after the first night. The first issue was that they woke up at 5:30 a.m., like clockwork, both of them screaming and running around the house. I tried to calmly explain that it was too early and that they needed to go back to bed. But Lucy started crying about how she didn't want to go back to bed, and Max joined in, just making everything worse. By 6 a.m., I was exhausted, and Ben was still asleep because he works night shifts, so I was handling it alone. The next morning, I planned a big breakfast for everyone, but Lucy refused to eat any of the pancakes I made because they were too big, and Max threw his cereal at the wall after he was told no more milk. I cleaned it up, but it was frustrating. Then, I tried to take them to the park to burn off some energy, but Lucy refused to wear her jacket, and Max kept running off and getting into everything. I spent most of the time chasing him down. By the time we got back to the house, I was frazzled. Then, things really took a turn. That evening, I was getting dinner ready when I noticed that Lucy was quietly sitting at the kitchen table, drawing. I thought, okay, maybe some peace and quiet, but then she said, "Aunt, my name, can I have some candy?" I told her no. It was too close to dinner, and we needed to wait. She started crying and saying I was mean, and that her mom always lets her have candy. I said no again, and she got really upset, yelling and crying. At that point, Max started crying too, and they both just screamed and screamed for what felt like an eternity. I eventually told them that if they didn't calm down, they would have to go to their rooms, but that only made things worse. Ben woke up at this point, trying to help, but honestly, the situation was already spiraling. Rachel and Tom didn't respond to my texts asking for advice or help, and after about an hour of screaming, I decided to just take them back to their rooms and let them calm down for a bit. The real issue came when I went to check on them. I opened the door to Lucy's room and found that she had taken all of her clothes off and was jumping on the bed. Max had taken the markers from the table and drawn all over the walls. I was absolutely floored. We've had kids visit before, but this was a whole new level of chaos. I took photos of the damage to send to Rachel, and she finally texted me back, saying she was sorry, but she had no idea how to handle their tantrums either. By the time Tom and Rachel got back to pick them up, I was beyond frazzled. The kids hadn't eaten their dinner, had trashed their rooms, and I was completely wiped out. I tried to be polite, but I basically said, "Next time, I don't think it's a good idea for the kids to stay here." Rachel was a bit taken aback, but said she understood. Tom didn't really say much, which was probably for the best because I was at my breaking point. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. Rachel and Tom asked if the kids could stay with us again while they went on another trip, this time for a weekend getaway. I was hesitant, to say the least, but I didn't want to seem unreasonable, so I agreed. This time, I asked Ben if he could take some time off work to help me out. He agreed, but I still had concerns. I sent Rachel a text saying, "Please let me know if there's anything specific I should be aware of before the visit." She replied, "They're fine. They'll be good." The day they arrived, things were already tense. Lucy seemed upset right away, saying she didn't want to stay with us, and Max clung to his mom like he was scared. I tried to reassure them, but honestly, I was already anticipating the worst. I wasn't wrong. The first night was, predictably, a disaster. By 2 a.m., both kids were up again, screaming and fighting over toys. Ben and I ended up in a huge argument because I felt like I was doing all the work. He had a rough shift the night before, and I knew he needed sleep, but I also felt like he should be helping more. I ended up spending the rest of the night pacing around the house with the kids until they finally passed out from exhaustion. The next morning, I felt like a zombie. I couldn't even get through breakfast without Lucy throwing a tantrum because I made scrambled eggs instead of pancakes. Max knocked over a glass of juice and then slipped in it, which only made him cry. And to top it all off, Lucy decided to help by trying to wash the dishes, but only managed to break a plate. By mid-morning, I was at my wit's end. I felt like I was living in a constant state of chaos, and I started snapping at Ben, who wasn't being as helpful as I thought he should be. At one point, I even locked myself in the bathroom just to get 5 minutes of peace. I know that sounds dramatic, but I honestly couldn't take it anymore. When Rachel and Tom finally came back, I was exhausted and near tears. Rachel could see how frazzled I was, and she apologized, but I told her that I couldn't do it anymore. I needed a break from the kids, and it wasn't just a one-time thing. I love them, but their behavior is overwhelming, and I don't feel like I'm equipped to deal with it. Since then, Rachel has been texting me saying I'm being too harsh and that it's just a phase the kids are going through. She said I'm being unfair and that they've always appreciated me watching the kids. But I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, and I'm honestly afraid that if they stay here again, I'll snap. I'm starting to feel resentful, and I really don't want to, but I just can't handle the stress anymore. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law's kids stay with us after what happened last time. I feel like I'm being reasonable, but maybe I'm overreacting. Please help me figure this out. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for wanting my sister-in-law to apologize for taking my wedding dress without asking. I, 28F, am getting married in 3 months to my fiancé Ben, 32M. We've been together for 5 years, and we've had an amazing relationship. We've always been a great team, and I couldn't ask for a better partner. I'm a fairly private person, and I've always tried to keep some aspects of my life, especially anything related to the wedding, between me and Ben, my parents, and a few close friends. I wasn't planning on making a big deal out of my wedding dress, but I found the perfect dress a few months ago at a local boutique, and I was over the moon when I found it. It was everything I'd wanted, simple, elegant, and just the right amount of sparkle. I bought it right then and there. The dress is a bit special to me because my mother wore it on her wedding day, and she passed away when I was young. My mom had kept the dress stored in a preservation box for years, and she had always said I would wear it when I got married. When I found it, I felt a sense of connection to her that I hadn't felt in years. So, I made the decision to wear it, even though it was a bit outdated, and I knew I'd need some alterations to make it fit just right. I also didn't want to tell too many people about the dress, so I kept it a secret until my bridal shower. Only a couple of close friends and family knew. Everyone was excited to see it when I showed it off, and I was so happy to have something of my mom's with me on my wedding day. Here's where things get complicated. Ben's sister, Hannah, 26F, is really close with me, but she has always had a bit of a complicated relationship with my family. She comes from a family where they don't really have many traditions or sentimental items. So, I think she has always found it a bit strange when my family is so focused on preserving heirlooms or following traditions. She has a habit of being somewhat dismissive about these things, and over the years, I've chalked it up to her not understanding how much those things mean to me. Anyway, after the bridal shower, I kept the dress safely in a closet in my bedroom. The night after the shower, I got a text from Hannah saying she'd borrowed my wedding dress to try it on for a few minutes. I thought this was strange, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I told her that it was very important to me and that I didn't want anyone touching it, but she insisted that she'd only wear it for a few minutes and promised to be super careful. I wasn't thrilled, but I agreed as long as she was respectful about it. Fast forward to the next day. I go to check on the dress, and it's gone. I looked everywhere in the house, and it was nowhere to be found. I texted Hannah, asking her if she knew where it was, and she said she might have left it at her apartment after trying it on. She claimed that she'd been in such a rush that she didn't have time to return it. I was furious. I can't explain how emotional I felt about this dress. I feel like it's the last thing I have that connects me to my mom, and the fact that Hannah took it without asking and had the audacity to not even bring it back right away felt like a betrayal. I don't care how long she borrowed it for. It wasn't hers to take in the first place. I immediately called her, asking her to bring it back, and she acted like it was no big deal. She didn't seem to understand why I was upset, and she kept downplaying it like I was overreacting. She said that I was being dramatic and that it was just a dress, that it's not like I was going to wear it before the wedding anyway. But that's not the point. I'm now in a situation where I haven't seen my dress in days. I keep telling her I want it back, but she keeps delaying and making excuses. It's making me question whether she really understands the significance of the dress to me, or if she just doesn't care. After all, she knew how much I valued it. She'd seen me cry when I first found it. I've tried talking to Ben about it, but he's very close with his sister, and he's asked me to be patient and don't make a big deal out of it. He thinks I'm overreacting, too, and that I should just let it go. I feel like my fiancé is not being supportive. I know he doesn't want to cause any tension with his family, but I feel like he should be standing by me and setting boundaries with his sister. I don't want to feel like I have to choose between my wedding dress and my future in-laws, but I also don't think I'm being unreasonable for asking for my dress back and for Hannah to apologize for taking it without asking. Now, I'm stuck in a situation where I don't know what to do. I'm angry and hurt by Hannah's actions, and I feel like Ben isn't backing me up. On top of everything else, I feel like I'm being gaslit into thinking I'm overreacting. It's my wedding dress, for crying out loud. AITA for wanting my sister-in-law to apologize and for demanding my wedding dress back right away. I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm being unreasonable, but I also think this is a huge deal. If the roles were reversed, I would never dream of taking someone else's dress without asking. I'd appreciate some outside perspective on this. I'm really struggling with how to handle it. AITA for refusing to help my sister pay for her wedding after she refused to acknowledge the financial burden it would place on me. I, 28F, have a younger sister, Rachel, 25F, who's getting married in a few months. I'm generally really happy for her. She's been with her fiancé for about 5 years, and I know she's been planning this wedding for over a year. She's always been a bit over the top, but she's my sister, and I love her. However, this wedding has taken a serious toll on me emotionally, financially, and even physically, and I'm starting to feel like I'm being taken advantage of. A little background. I'm the primary breadwinner in my family. I have a full-time job that pays decently, and I also have a side hustle that helps me save for things like retirement or emergencies. My parents are retired and live on a fixed income, so they made it clear they can't help with the wedding. I've also been managing the family finances for a few years now because my dad has health issues and my mom struggles with budgeting. I have a decent amount of debt myself, mostly student loans and some credit card debt, but I've been chipping away at it for years and finally have a plan in place. When Rachel got engaged, she was ecstatic and started talking about her dream wedding. She wanted a big ceremony with all the bells and whistles, a fancy venue, a professional photographer, a custom-made gown, and an open bar, among other things. At first, I was all in. I wanted to be supportive, and I thought it was just the excitement talking. But as the months went on, the budget started growing exponentially. She wanted to rent a mansion for the weekend, hire a celebrity wedding planner, and fly in her entire extended family from overseas. The cost of everything started to feel impossible to manage, and she kept saying, "It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. We need to make it perfect." In the beginning, she asked if I could help with some of the smaller things, like the bridal shower and rehearsal dinner. I agreed, no problem. But then the requests kept coming. She asked if I could contribute to the wedding dress, which cost over $8,000. She also wanted me to chip in for the venue deposit, which was $15,000. She's been asking me for months, and each time I've said I could only help with a portion, but I never expected the scale of what she was asking. I should also mention that Rachel's fiancé is from a wealthy family. They're more than capable of covering a large portion of the wedding costs. And while they've offered to pitch in, Rachel has been adamant that she wants the wedding to be her vision and doesn't want them interfering with the decisions. Fine, I get that, but it feels like she's putting all of the pressure on me. A couple of weeks ago, things came to a head. Rachel asked me for a loan to cover half of the venue cost. She said she would pay me back over the next year. When I hesitated, she made it sound like I didn't want to support her on her special day, and that it was my duty as her older sister to help make her wedding dreams come true. I tried explaining that I'm in no position to be taking on that kind of financial burden, especially when I'm already paying off my own debts and trying to save for the future. She insisted that I was being selfish and didn't understand how important this day was to her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her that while I loved her and wanted her to have a beautiful wedding, I couldn't justify going into more debt just to please her. I offered to help with smaller, more manageable things like contributing to the wedding favors or paying for part of the floor arrangements, but I drew the line at taking on such a huge responsibility. Rachel didn't take it well. She said she'd always supported me and that I was being cold and unreasonable. She accused me of being jealous of her wedding and her relationship, which is absolutely not true. I don't feel any jealousy at all. I just don't think it's fair for her to expect me to go into debt to help fund her dream wedding. She hasn't spoken to me much since then, and I've heard from our parents that she's been really upset with me. The thing is, I don't know if I'm in the wrong here. I understand that weddings can be a big deal, but it feels like Rachel is living in a fantasy world where money doesn't matter. I don't have the financial freedom to fund her wedding, and I feel like I'm being guilted into doing so. I've tried to be supportive in other ways, but now it feels like nothing I do is enough. I know weddings can be stressful, but I can't help but feel like my sister is more focused on the extravagance than the meaning behind it all. I don't want to lose my relationship with her over this, but I also don't want to sacrifice my financial stability for her vision of the perfect wedding. So, AITA for refusing to help my sister pay for her wedding after she refused to acknowledge the financial burden it would place on me. So here's the deal. I, 30F, am engaged to my fiancé, Adam, 32M, and we've been planning our wedding for about a year now. I've always dreamed of having a traditional wedding, and one of the things I was most excited about was finding the perfect dress. I saved up for months, spent hours researching different designers, and tried on a lot of dresses before I found one that made me feel like $1,000,000. It's a beautiful custom-made gown, long train, intricate lace detailing, and it's just everything I've ever wanted. My mom, who's been supportive throughout the entire planning process, has been the most excited about it too. I've been very clear with everyone, including my family, that my wedding dress is not something I'm willing to lend out, ever. I've put so much of my heart into this dress, and I plan to keep it as a keepsake for the future. It's not just an expensive piece of clothing to me. It's a symbol of the day that means the world to me. After I wear it, I'll preserve it, but I don't plan on sharing it with anyone. I made this clear to everyone, including my younger sister, Rebecca, 27F. She's been kind of, well, I don't want to sound harsh, but a little entitled and pushy when it comes to things like this. Rebecca has been engaged for 2 years now and has struggled with the whole wedding planning process. She and her fiancé, Jason, 29M, are on a tight budget, and I totally get that they're doing what they can with what they have. However, from the start, Rebecca has made it pretty clear that she's been jealous of my wedding planning. She'll make comments like, well, must be nice to have money to blow on a dress, or I guess I'll just settle for a simple ceremony since I can't afford anything extravagant. I've tried to be understanding, and I've given her advice on how to make her wedding day special without breaking the bank. A few weeks ago, out of the blue, Rebecca came to me and said she wanted to borrow my wedding dress for her wedding. At first, I thought she was joking, but no, she was completely serious. She explained that she couldn't afford a new dress, and it would mean so much to her if she could wear mine. She even promised she would take good care of it and that she would return it after her wedding. I told her straight up that I wasn't comfortable with that. I told her that I'd already made it clear to everyone that my dress wasn't something I would be lending out, and I didn't think it would be right for her to wear it. It's a very personal thing, and I felt like it would take away from the significance of it for me. Rebecca didn't take it well. She started crying and accused me of being selfish and not thinking about her feelings. She said that I was being a bridezilla and that I didn't care about her needs. She even said that I had plenty of time to buy a new dress, so why couldn't I share mine with her? I told her that I wasn't going to change my mind, but that if she needed help finding a budget-friendly dress, I'd be happy to help her look. After that conversation, Rebecca started telling the rest of our family about how I had refused to share my dress with her. My mom was pretty upset too, and she called me, saying I was being unreasonable. She said that family is supposed to help each other out, and that I should let Rebecca borrow the dress since she couldn't afford one. She even suggested that I should just look at it as a way to make the day extra special for her, since she didn't have the luxury of picking out a dress like I did. My dad, on the other hand, was more on my side, but he said I should at least consider the idea of lending it to her, given how much she was struggling. I've talked to Adam about it, and he's fully supportive of my decision. He's also not thrilled about Rebecca's behavior, and he feels like she's trying to make my special day about herself. I'm starting to feel like the bad guy here, though. I get that she's in a tough spot, but it just doesn't sit right with me to let her wear my dress. I know she's my sister, but this feels like something I should be able to keep for myself. I've always been very protective of my wedding day and the memories attached to it. So, AITA for refusing to lend my sister my wedding dress, even though she's really upset about it. I don't want to come across as selfish or petty, but it just doesn't feel right to me. I feel like I'm being made to feel guilty for setting boundaries with my own wedding. AITA for not attending my brother's wedding because of how he treated my fiancé. I, 28M, have a brother, 30M. Let's call him Mark. Mark and I have always had a pretty close relationship growing up, but as adults, we've had our ups and downs. Still, I thought that I knew him well and that we were good friends. That changed when I got engaged to my fiancée, 26F, Laura, and Mark's behavior toward her turned downright awful. Let me give you some context. Laura and I have been together for about 5 years now. She's kind, funny, and everyone who meets her loves her. At first, Mark seemed fine with her. But over the last year or so, things started getting weird. Mark started making comments about Laura's appearance, specifically about her weight. He's never outright called her fat, but there have been a lot of subtle jabs. He'd make snide remarks about how she should wear more flattering clothes, or that she'd look so much better if she lost a few pounds. At first, I tried to brush it off. I thought maybe Mark was just being jokingly mean, but then it became more frequent and less of a joke. The last straw was at a family barbecue last month. Laura was wearing a sundress that she looked absolutely gorgeous in. Mark, in front of everyone, looked her up and down and said, "You'd be pretty if you didn't look like a walking refrigerator in that dress." Laura was visibly hurt, and I could see her face drop. I could see she was trying to hold back tears, but I could also tell she was embarrassed. I don't know what happened to my brother, but I snapped. I told him to knock it off, that he was being cruel, and that it wasn't funny. He laughed it off like I was being overly sensitive, but I was furious. I told him that he needed to apologize to Laura, and if he didn't, I was done with him. Mark refused to apologize, and instead he said, maybe if she didn't look like that, I'd have more respect for her. I've never been so disgusted by anything he said. That night, I spoke with Laura, and she was devastated. She had always tried to be polite to Mark, even when he made those comments, but at this point, she was done. She told me that if I was going to keep a relationship with my brother, she didn't think she could be around him anymore. She didn't want to be in an environment where people constantly put her down for things she couldn't change. It was heartbreaking to hear that, and I was torn. On one hand, I loved my brother and wanted to have a relationship with him, but on the other hand, I couldn't stand how he treated the woman I loved. A few weeks later, Mark called me to let me know that he was getting married to his longtime girlfriend, Jenna. He invited me to the wedding, and I honestly thought about it for a while. I knew I'd be expected to attend, but I couldn't bring myself to do it after how he treated Laura. I spoke with her about it, and she told me that she wasn't going to come to the wedding, and she didn't expect me to either. She didn't want to be a part of a family event where Mark could act like he was above her. I ended up calling Mark back and telling him that I wouldn't be attending the wedding. I explained that I couldn't stand by and support someone who had been so hurtful to my fiancée. I told him that I loved him, but he needed to get his priorities straight if he wanted me to be a part of his life. He didn't take it well. He said that I was being ridiculous and that I should just get over it because it was his wedding and I was acting like a child. He accused me of choosing Laura over him, but in my mind, I wasn't choosing between them. I was choosing to stand up for my fiancée, who had been treated like garbage by him for far too long. Now, the rest of my family is mad at me. They're all saying that I should put my differences aside for the sake of the family and attend the wedding. They've said things like it's just one day, and he's your brother. You'll regret it if you don't go. My mom, in particular, has been extremely upset with me, claiming that I'm being too dramatic. She keeps telling me that family is more important than anything, and that I should try to reconcile with Mark before his big day. I've also had some friends who think I'm overreacting, saying that Mark is just being jokingly harsh, and I shouldn't let it get in the way of my family relationships. I feel really conflicted. On one hand, I understand that family is important, but on the other hand, I feel like I'm being asked to ignore how badly Mark treated Laura and pretend like everything is fine. I also don't want to go to a wedding where I know I'll be surrounded by people who don't respect the woman I'm going to marry. I don't think I can pretend like nothing happened. I'm not sure if I'm being too hard on my brother, but I feel like I have to take a stand for Laura. Am I the asshole for not going to my brother's wedding because of how he treated my fiancée? AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's wedding after she didn't invite my partner? I, 29F, have been best friends with Cassie, 30F, for over 15 years. We've been through a lot together. High school, college, messy breakups, family drama, you name it. We're very close, and we always told each other that we'd be there for every major life event, no matter what. That's why when Cassie got engaged to her fiancé, Jake, 32M, last year, I was thrilled for her. I was happy for her, and I immediately started helping her plan the wedding. I was her maid of honor, and we started organizing everything from the venue to the dress. The wedding was supposed to be this summer, and I was genuinely excited. However, things took a weird turn recently that has caused a massive rift between us, and now I'm left questioning if I was in the wrong. For context, I've been with my partner, Mike, 31M, for about 2 years now. Mike and I met through mutual friends, and we clicked almost immediately. We've been living together for a year and have had a pretty stable and loving relationship. He's super supportive of me, and we've made a lot of progress together. Cassie has met Mike several times, and they've always gotten along. She even joked about how cute we were as a couple. So, about 3 months ago, Cassie told me the guest list was getting tight, and she needed to trim it down. She said she was focusing on family and a few close friends, but that Mike was welcome to come to the wedding as a guest, just not part of the immediate circle she was focusing on. At first, I didn't think too much of it. I figured there was a logic to it. However, as time went on, I started to feel uncomfortable about the situation. Cassie didn't explicitly say it, but it felt like she was suggesting Mike wasn't important enough to be part of her wedding in any meaningful way. To make matters worse, she didn't even send Mike a +1 invitation. When I asked her about it, she said it was just a logistics thing, and there was no ill intent, but I could tell there was something off. I didn't press her on it too much because I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. However, the situation kept bugging me. And then, the straw that broke the camel's back came when Cassie invited one of her college friends who she hadn't spoken to in years, but who hadn't met the love of her life yet. I was confused because Cassie and I both know this friend isn't nearly as close to her as Mike is to me, and I couldn't help but feel hurt. I decided to have a candid conversation with Cassie. I told her that I was excited to be her maid of honor and support her on her big day, but I wasn't comfortable attending the wedding if Mike wasn't invited as my partner. I explained that it wasn't just about the ceremony, but about how significant he is to me. I told her that, since we're living together and planning a future together, his exclusion from such an important event felt like a slap in the face. Cassie responded by saying I was being dramatic and that I was overthinking things. She assured me that Mike was welcome to come as a guest, but she insisted it wasn't personal. She told me that she was keeping the guest list small for budget reasons, and that she was just trying to make the day as stress-free as possible. I told her I didn't buy it, and that it didn't feel right that someone I'd been in a committed relationship with for over 2 years was being treated as less important than people she hadn't even spoken to in ages. Cassie kept brushing me off, saying I needed to get over it and stop making it a big deal. She even tried to guilt-trip me by saying that if I didn't attend, it would ruin her wedding. I spent a few days thinking about it. I tried to imagine going to her wedding without Mike, but it just didn't sit well with me. I can't imagine celebrating such a huge milestone in her life without my partner by my side, especially when I'm supposed to be one of the most important people in her life. So, I made the decision. I texted Cassie and told her that, after giving a lot of thought, I couldn't attend the wedding if Mike wasn't invited. I explained that I was really hurt by her decision, and I didn't want to be put in a situation where I'd feel uncomfortable or unwelcome. Cassie didn't take it well. She called me in a rage and started yelling, accusing me of being selfish and unsupportive. She told me I was ruining our friendship over something so small and that I should be ashamed of myself for making her wedding about me. She kept saying I was acting like a child and that I was throwing a tantrum because I couldn't have it my way. At this point, I started to feel like I was being unreasonable, so I decided to try and make it right. I told Cassie that I was sorry for how my decision made her feel, but that I still wasn't okay with the situation. She ignored my apology and said she didn't want to talk to me anymore unless I came to my senses. She ended the call by saying that I was no longer her maid of honor and that I wasn't invited to the wedding. Now, our friendship is in a complete mess. I've reached out to her a couple of times to try and apologize and clear the air, but she hasn't responded. It's been weeks, and I'm starting to feel like I've lost my best friend over this. I understand that weddings are stressful, but I can't shake the feeling that Cassie was purposely excluding Mike for reasons that don't seem to make sense. On one hand, I feel like I did the right thing by standing up for my relationship and setting boundaries. On the other hand, I'm heartbroken that it's come to this. I've never had a friend turn their back on me over something like this. I've been told by some mutual friends that Cassie is being dramatic and that I should just let it go, but I feel like it's a matter of principle. So, AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's wedding because she didn't invite my partner. AITA for telling my wife I wanted a divorce after she convinced me to quit my job and then went back to work full-time herself. I, 34M, have been married to my wife, Carla, 32F, for 6 years. We've always had a pretty traditional setup in terms of work. She worked part-time after we had kids, and I worked full-time to support us. For the most part, this was fine with me. I've always been the primary breadwinner, and Carla, while not working full-time, contributed significantly to the household with her part-time job and by taking care of our 2 kids. About a year ago, we had a conversation about how we were both feeling a little burnout. I was working a demanding job in tech, and Carla felt like her part-time work was also overwhelming her. The problem, though, was that Carla's job didn't pay nearly as well as mine, so it wasn't like she was bringing in a lot of money. One day, Carla sat me down and said she had been thinking about something. What if I quit my job to focus on our family and my well-being, and she could go back to work full-time to support us? She said she could take on a higher-paying position at her company and that this would allow me to have more time for myself, as well as be a better father. She also said it would be nice if I had more time to rediscover my passions. Honestly, I was pretty skeptical, but she really sold me on the idea, saying she'd feel much better if I was more present with the kids and not constantly stressed out by my job. At first, I didn't want to let her down, so I agreed. I gave up my job, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders for a while. I spent more time with the kids, started getting involved with local community projects, and honestly, it wasn't as bad as I had thought. I had time to take care of things around the house, cook meals, and support Carla however I could. However, as time went on, I started noticing things that made me uncomfortable. Carla was working long hours at her job, which I knew was demanding. But then, one evening, she came home and casually mentioned that her work was offering her a huge promotion that came with a substantial pay raise and more responsibilities. She was excited, and I was happy for her. But at the same time, I started to wonder why I had given up my job if she was going to work full-time and leave me to manage everything at home. A couple of months later, things really started to shift. Carla had been working 50-hour weeks, sometimes coming home late at night, while I had continued doing the bulk of the housework and caring for the kids. It was starting to feel a little one-sided. She didn't seem to appreciate the amount of work I was doing at home, and I was beginning to feel like she had gotten exactly what she wanted. She was excelling at her career, but I was stuck in a situation where I didn't feel like I had a role anymore. It started to feel like she was acting more like a single person than a wife. She'd come home from work exhausted, but wouldn't help with the kids or any household chores. I had to deal with everything, and she complained if I asked her to pitch in. It got to the point where I would wait for her to get home, expecting her to help out with the kids or even cook, but I'd end up doing everything myself. The more I thought about it, the more resentful I became. I had given up my career for her vision of how our family should function, but it was clear that things weren't balanced. I felt like she had manipulated me into quitting my job and taking on a role I didn't even want, while she got to advance in her career without any of the sacrifices. She even started going out with her colleagues after work, leaving me to take care of the kids at night, and I started feeling like a live-in babysitter. After a few months of this, I finally had a breaking point. I confronted Carla one night when she came home late from work again. I told her that I was unhappy and that I wanted to go back to work. I explained that I felt like I had been sold on the idea of being a stay-at-home dad, but it wasn't working for me anymore. I also told her that I didn't think I could continue in this marriage if things didn't change. She was stunned. She said that she had been working hard to provide for the family, and I was just acting like a spoiled brat who couldn't appreciate everything she was doing for us. She accused me of being selfish and ungrateful for everything she was doing. But I told her that I felt like she had tricked me into quitting my job and then leaving me to handle everything at home while she focused on her career. I told her I was unhappy and didn't feel respected in the relationship. Things got heated. Carla said that I was being unfair and that she had only suggested I quit my job because I was so stressed out and unhappy with my work. She said it was supposed to be a temporary thing, but she wasn't going to give up the opportunity to advance in her career just because I felt uncomfortable in my new role. I asked her why she didn't just hire help around the house if she was going to be working full-time, but she just brushed it off, saying it wasn't in the budget. The conversation ended with a lot of tension, and I slept on the couch that night. The next day, I tried to calm down and reassess everything. But I couldn't get past the feeling that I had sacrificed my own career and happiness to support hers, only to have her turn the tables and leave me with the domestic duties while she thrived professionally. I ended up telling her I was seriously considering a divorce. She was absolutely crushed and said I was being unreasonable, that I was throwing away everything we had worked for. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been manipulated into a situation that wasn't fair to me. We've been arguing for days now, and neither of us is backing down. So, Reddit, AITA for wanting a divorce after my wife convinced me to quit my job and then went back to working full-time while leaving me to handle everything at home? Should I have just sucked it up and kept my mouth shut? Or am I right to feel betrayed? AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her treatment of my son? Let me give you some background. I, 34F, have a sister, Laura, 32F, and we're not close at all. We have very different personalities, and growing up, we always butted heads. I'm the quiet, reserved one, and she's always been the loud, outgoing life of the party type. We've had our fair share of arguments, especially in our teens, but we've always maintained some form of a relationship because, well, she's my sister. But that doesn't mean we're best friends or anything. About 4 years ago, I got married to my husband, Jake, 35M. We were thrilled, and we had a small, intimate wedding. Laura was there, of course, but she didn't exactly help with the planning or even offer much support. That didn't really bother me. It was just how she was. She came, enjoyed the party, and then made some offhand comment about how my wedding was too boring for her taste. Fine, whatever. Flash forward a few years, and Laura got engaged to her fiancé, Mark, 34M. They decided to have a big, extravagant wedding, and naturally they asked me to be a bridesmaid. I didn't want to be part of the wedding party, but since it was my sister, I agreed. She seemed so excited and talked about how she wanted everything to be perfect. However, things took a turn when I told her that my son, Max, 7, who has ADHD, would need to come to the wedding with me. Max has a hard time sitting still in large, crowded settings, and it's been a challenge for him to be in environments like that for long periods of time. I always try to plan around his needs, so I told Laura that I would need to take breaks with him and possibly leave early depending on how he was doing. She wasn't thrilled about it, but she said she understood. She also mentioned that there wouldn't be much space for children at the venue, which I thought was odd considering she invited several other children. But I brushed it off. The day of the wedding came, and things didn't go as smoothly as I had hoped. Max had a hard time during the ceremony, so I stepped outside with him to help him calm down. I thought this was the right thing to do, so he wouldn't disrupt the event. We stayed outside for about 30 minutes, and when we went back in, we missed a chunk of the reception because Max needed to settle down again. At the reception, Laura didn't speak to me much. In fact, she barely acknowledged my presence. The few times I saw her, she made passive-aggressive comments about Max needing to behave or how it was such a shame that I couldn't get him to just sit still like other kids. I told her that Max was doing the best he could, and he had been fine for the most part, but she didn't seem interested in hearing it. The tipping point came when Max had a small meltdown in the middle of dinner. He was overwhelmed by the noise, the people, and the general chaos of the event, so he started crying. I quickly took him outside to calm him down, and when I came back, I could feel the tension in the air. Laura pulled me aside and said, "You really need to get a grip on your son. He's embarrassing me. You can't just let him run wild like that." I was taken aback. Max was not running wild. He had a moment of distress, and I handled it. I tried to explain to Laura that he was doing his best, but she was having none of it. She went on about how her wedding was the most important day of her life, and I was ruining it by bringing my problem child into the situation. I was furious, but I didn't want to make a scene at her wedding, so I just left. I took Max home, and I felt utterly crushed. My sister had just told me that my son was a problem. The child I've been doing everything I can for who has a medical condition that affects his ability to deal with stress, was somehow ruining her perfect day. I knew that she wasn't perfect, but I didn't think she could be so cruel about it. After I left, I didn't hear from Laura for days. She finally texted me saying that I was overreacting and that it wasn't that big of a deal. She told me that I had embarrassed her and that she couldn't believe I left her wedding early. I replied, telling her that I didn't appreciate her comments and that if she had a problem with how I handled Max, she could have said something more kindly. I also reminded her that I was doing the best I could to accommodate her special day while also taking care of my son. Now, the problem is that I was invited to Laura's wedding again, but this time she's told me that Max is not welcome at the reception. She said that it's not a kid-friendly event and that it's a formal event where kids can't just act up. She said that I could come, but Max couldn't, and I would have to figure out childcare for him if I wanted to attend. I feel like this is a slap in the face. Laura knows that Max's condition isn't something he can just control, and it feels like she's asking me to choose between my son and her. I told her that I wouldn't be attending if she was going to treat my son this way, but she's insisting that I'm being dramatic. Now the whole family is on her side, saying that I should just find someone to watch Max and come to her wedding. I honestly don't know if I should just let it go and go to the wedding or if I should stand my ground. I've already missed one wedding of hers, and if I miss this one too, I feel like she'll never forgive me. But I also feel like I shouldn't have to apologize for my son's needs. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of how she's treating my son? AITA for not letting my sister stay with me after she broke my trust and lied about her relationship? I, 28F, have a sister, Kayla, 24F, who I've always been close with. Growing up, we were pretty much inseparable, and even as adults, we kept in touch regularly. We've always had a pretty supportive relationship, and I've always tried to be there for her whenever she needed me. I'm generally a laid-back person and don't like conflict, so when issues arise, I usually try to handle them as calmly and fairly as possible. A few months ago, Kayla started dating a guy, Derek, 26M. I hadn't met him in person yet, but she'd mentioned him a few times, and from what she told me, they seemed to be getting pretty serious. I wasn't overly concerned or anything. I trusted her judgment, and she seemed happy. But something about Derek didn't sit well with me. She started distancing herself from our family and friends, and whenever I'd ask about him, she'd act kind of defensive, even though she always told me everything was fine. Fast forward to about a month ago, I noticed something that didn't quite add up. I was visiting Kayla's apartment to hang out, and I ended up finding a receipt in her trash. The receipt was for a hotel room. It wasn't a small motel either. It was for one of those upscale resorts that people generally only stay at for special occasions. I thought it was weird, but I didn't think too much of it at the time. Later that night, I brought it up casually. I said, "Hey, I saw a hotel receipt in your trash. Are you and Derek planning a getaway or something?" She froze for a second before quickly brushing it off and saying, "Oh, it's nothing. Just a little weekend getaway I booked with some friends. Derek wasn't able to make it because he had work." Now, I'm not a nosy person, but something about her response made me suspicious. I let it go at that moment, but in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Something didn't add up. Over the next couple of weeks, I started to notice more inconsistencies in what she was telling me about Derek. One day, she'd say he was on a work trip. The next day, she'd say they were hanging out all weekend. She kept canceling plans to hang out with me because Derek wanted her to do something with him. Again, I let it slide, but I was starting to get uncomfortable with how much she was changing in her behavior. Then, about 2 weeks ago, I found out that Derek wasn't who he seemed. Kayla had told me that Derek had been out of town for a week on business, and that's when I found out from a mutual friend that Derek had been spotted at a bar with another woman. This wasn't a just friend situation. This was a full-blown romantic date. My stomach dropped. I immediately texted Kayla, asking if we could talk. When she came over to my place, I asked her straight up about it. "Kayla, I found out that Derek was seen with another woman. Is there something you need to tell me?" She got defensive and angry at first, claiming I was making things up. But after some pushing, she admitted that Derek had been cheating on her for the past month. She said she found out about it, but had been too embarrassed to tell me because she didn't want me to think she was weak for staying in the relationship. I was shocked. Kayla had always been someone who prided herself on being independent and strong. I didn't understand why she would tolerate this behavior from someone, especially since she had always been the first to tell me to stand up for myself in relationships. I tried to be supportive, but honestly, I was really hurt. She knew how much I cared about her, and instead of coming to me when things went south, she had been lying to me for weeks. Here's where it gets tricky. A couple of days after this conversation, Kayla asked if she could stay with me for a while. She said she needed a place to crash because things were getting too tense at her apartment, and she just needed a break from everything. I love my sister, but I was already feeling betrayed, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to have her under my roof after everything that had happened. I told her I needed some time to think about it, and after reflecting, I decided that I couldn't let her stay with me. Not right now, at least. I told her, Kayla, I'm really hurt by everything that's happened, and I'm not sure if it's a good idea for us to live together right now. I need some space, and I think you need to process things on your own. She got really upset, saying that I was being cruel and unsupportive. She argued that I was punishing her for something Derek did, and I wasn't being a good sister. I told her I understood she was hurt and needed support, but I needed to protect my own mental health as well. I also told her that I felt like she wasn't being honest with me in the past, and I couldn't just pretend like everything was fine and continue to let her lie to me. I thought that I was being reasonable, but she was really upset and stormed out of my apartment, telling me that I was abandoning her when she needed me most. After that conversation, things between us have been really tense. She's been cold towards me, and I feel like I've lost the closeness we once had. My friends and some family members have said that I did the right thing by standing my ground and not enabling her to avoid facing the reality of her situation. But others have said I should have been there for her, especially after she got hurt. I'm just torn. I don't want to lose my sister, but I also don't feel like I can keep enabling her to make poor choices and avoid facing her problems. I just don't know if I was too harsh in telling her she couldn't stay with me. AITA, thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.